All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful way of thinking, a strategy that connects three parts of the business world you'd probably never think to put in the same sentence. It's all about looking past the obvious, easy choices to find a much stronger, more resilient way forward. So let's start with a bit of a riddle. What on earth do sustainable factories, the data centers that run the cloud, and those little chatbots that pop up on websites have in common? I know, they seem totally unrelated, but the answer reveals a huge trap that so many companies fall into, and, more importantly, a really smart way to get out of it.
And that trap, well, it has one name: convenience. It's the path of least resistance, the default setting, the choice that seems like the easiest and fastest solution in the moment. But this path, it's got a pretty significant downside.
In the world of manufacturing, for example, convenience looks like this. You take raw materials, you make a product, and then, when it's done, it gets thrown away. Simple, right? But this linear model, as our sources point out, is incredibly wasteful. It just can't last forever as we start running out of stuff.
Now, what about in the tech world? Here, convenience often means going all in with a single cloud provider. You use all their proprietary tools because, hey, they're designed to work together perfectly. It makes development super fast. But this creates a huge problem called vendor lock-in, where trying to switch to anyone else becomes a nightmare, both technically and financially.
And customer service? Oh, the easy route is just to plug in a basic chatbot to answer questions. You automate the whole thing and kind of just forget about it. The problem is, this approach completely ignores what customers actually want and need from that conversation, which usually just leads to a whole lot of frustration.
So as you can probably guess, all this short-term convenience comes with some very real, very high long-term costs. Let's peel back the curtain a little and see what the real price of easy is.
When you start to connect these dots, a really clear pattern shows up. That take, make, dispose model, it's a huge contributor to environmental damage. Manufacturing alone is responsible for about a fifth of global CO2 emissions. That vendor lock-in, it's not just some tech headache, it's a massive strategic and financial risk. And those set-it-and-forget-it chatbots, they tick off your customers and can seriously damage your brand.
And when we talk about financial risk, the numbers are just staggering. The cloud market is projected to be worth almost $1.5 trillion by 2029. Getting locked into one provider means you give up your power to negotiate and control a huge chunk of your budget in a market that is just absolutely massive.
This quote from one of our sources on customer experience really just hits the nail on the head. It's not just about annoying a few users. Taking the convenient route actively makes your business weaker because you're failing to deliver what people actually expect from you.
Okay, so enough doom and gloom. We see the trap. Now how do we get out of it? Well, the solution is a unified strategy, one that moves beyond just thinking about today. It's all about prioritizing foresight, flexibility, and real resilience. It's about designing for the future.
So for manufacturing, the future has an aim: the circular economy. Instead of that straight line to the landfill, think of it as a circle. The whole idea is to design waste out of the system from the very start, to keep materials in use for as long as possible through repair and recycling, and to help regenerate our natural systems. It's just a fundamentally smarter way to do things.
Now for the cloud, getting out of the trap starts with knowing what you're really up against. And this diagram, it shows it perfectly. Vendor lock-in isn't just one single chain holding you down. It's more like a tangled web. You're dealing with issues around standards, security, being able to move your data. It's this complexity that makes having a real strategy so crucial.
And here's what that strategy looks like. The blueprint for real tech freedom means you've got a design for mobility right from day one. You use open source standards so your data isn't trapped. You make sure your applications can be moved, and you build a system to manage it all. And it's not a one-and-done thing. You have to keep checking in and adjusting as you go.
And for customer experience, designing for the future means figuring out what actually matters to people. This model here breaks it down into three key drivers: ease of use, personalization, and responsiveness. Now, the temptation is to think that all three are equally important, but as we're about to see, they are definitely not.
Okay, so this all sounds good in theory, right? But does it actually work in the real world? Absolutely. Let's take a look at how some leading companies are already putting these strategies to work and getting some pretty amazing results.
I mean, just look at this stuff. BMW cut its production CO2 emissions by a staggering 70% by rethinking its supply chain.
Patagonia, with its Worn Wear program, kept over 100,000 pieces of clothing out of landfills in just 1 year by repairing them. These are not small tweaks. This is a fundamental redesign of how they do business. And in the technology space, you see the same kind of shift. It's about moving away from those closed proprietary systems and embracing open source alternatives. So instead of being stuck with a vendor's specific database, companies are using tools like Apache Cassandra. They're getting control back, and with it, freedom and flexibility.
Now, let's get back to our chatbot question. What really makes for a good customer experience? Well, the research found that those 3 factors we mentioned, responsiveness, personalization, and ease of use, they explain a whopping 63.6% of the customer's overall experience. That is a huge amount of explanatory power.
But here's the jaw dropper. Just look at this chart. The effect of responsiveness is enormous. And the effect of personalization and ease of use, they're tiny in comparison. It turns out that they are not all equally important, not even close. So here's the big takeaway. The thing that customers value most, by a long shot, is getting quick, timely, and actually helpful support. All that effort on fancy personalization or making the interface slick, it's way less important. Designing with intention means you put your energy where it's going to have the biggest impact. Okay, let's bring it all home. We've talked about factories, cloud architecture, and chatbots. It's time to tie these threads together into one single, powerful takeaway for you.
Here it is. A unified strategy for resilience really has 3 main parts. First, you design for circularity. You build systems that give back instead of just taking. Second, you design for portability. You build technology that's flexible and can adapt. And third, you design for responsiveness. You focus on what your customers really truly need. And that brings us right back to our riddle from the beginning. The common thread here, the one thing that connects sustainable factories, cloud data, and great chatbots is a choice. It's the choice to move beyond the easy path of short-term convenience and instead to build things with intention, with foresight, and with flexibility.
That's really the core lesson here. So the final question I'll leave you with is a simple one to ask, but a pretty hard one to answer. When you look at your own work, your own business, your own decisions, is your strategy built for convenience or is it built for resilience?